With all the shameless plugs out the way, let's go ahead and set the table for our esteemed guest today. It goes without saying, this man has done some great work that we both admire, whether it's deep diving into the history of Marvel and DC or picking the brains of some of the best creative teams in comics. He's put real blood, sweat, and tears into this artistic medium that we all love and share. And he was a real deal, real life superhero, which might be the ultimate flex for any longtime comic fan. We'll talk about that more later on. With over 500 plus videos of comic analysis under his belt, it goes without saying he's a true bastion of comic culture and the perfect representative for what it has to offer the world.
I feel like we need like some wrestling intro music, man. Like, I'm proud of you, bro. That's pretty good.
I appreciate it. You know what? Speaking of wrestling, I'm gonna go ahead and give our guest of honor a different. I'm not gonna give him the normal round of applause that I give everyone else. I'm gonna give him something special. Shortbox Nation. Without further ado, let's welcome Chris Piers to the show.
Thank you, guys. If you're playing applause, I don't hear it on my end, but I trust you. I trust you that there is applause.
Look, it's raving.
Visual, I'll do the what do you call it? ASL stuff.
There it is. There it is.
Dang, Chris, I'm telling you, it's raving applause, and I gave you a little special intro. All right.
You gave me like way too big of an intro. That was like the most like you just waxed my car. That was a lot. That was a lot to live up to.
Don't worry.
That set the expectations like really, really high, and now Chris, I've got to like fulfill
Chris,
that.
You'll come to realize that our standards are ridiculously low, and you'll be just fine on the show.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. Thank you, C.
I have never heard anyone. I've never heard that phrase. You've waxed my car, but I will be using that.
I guess I just made it up.
That's good.
He is like a wrestler. He's got catchphrases.
Yeah, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, buddy.
This is a big moment for us. Chris, let's get some easy stuff out the way, man. I understand that you are living in Seattle, right? You're in Seattle?
The Seattle area, yeah, just a little south of it, but yeah.
Okay.
It's like 15 minutes to downtown.
Cool. So, are you originally from the West Coast?
No.
Okay.
I'm originally from just a little south of Boston, so the East Coast.
Okay. So if that's the case, then what's the comic scene like in your area then? Was it like one of the reasons you wanted to move out there, or?
No, nothing like that. I've always had a job and, went to college and got my degree and worked in marketing for many, many years. And 9 years ago, I got a job offer in this Seattle area. I was living in DC at the time, and my then girlfriend, now wife, her family is from Seattle. She grew up here. So when we were offered an opportunity to come back to her hometown, all expenses paid to move and stuff like that, it made sense. It made sense. So that's what brought me across the country.
Right on.
And what's the comic scene like in your area? Like, do you have a go-to comic shop?
I do have a couple, actually, although I have to drive a little further south to get to some good ones. Tacoma has a pair of shops that I personally like shopping at. One is called Atomic Comics. One is called Stargazer. They sort of each specialize in maybe a little more mainstream and a little more indie, but they're both really nice and clean, super friendly, knowledgeable staff, like really, really good shops. So those are the ones I shop at these days. Yeah.
Chris, I'm curious, as someone who is putting out videos every week, if not sometimes double a week. What is your pull list looking like? Like, how many titles would you say is on your pull list?
I happen to have this week's. I would say maybe 8 to 9 comics a week.
Okay, that's
for sort of floppies, and then I might also be picking up maybe 1 to 2 back issues, maybe 1 to 2 manga, or 1 to 2 trades on top of that. Sometimes, on the high end of what I do.
Yeah. That's modest.
Yeah, I don't think I get that much. But sometimes when I pick a topic, that's when I'm getting sort of a back issue or a trade to sort of refamiliarize myself with stuff. When I moved across the country, just to be clear, I sold off almost all my then collection, about 30 long boxes.
Wow.
And so sometimes that stuff I still remember in my head, but to refer to it for a video, I might need to get it digitally or get a trade paperback sometimes. So sometimes I'm sort of refilling holes in my modest now collection.
Fair enough. All right.
Yeah.
So, Chris, one of the things I had to tell C as we were getting ready for the show, and he was getting hyped to talk to you. I said, C, before we become comic trope groupies, we have to get the business stuff out the way, right? We got to make sure that we let Chris talk about why he's even coming on the show in the to begin with.
Oh, okay.
And so I want to make sure we get this out the way in the beginning, so everyone hears this. That
spread the word.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got your first comic cover ever coming out via Dynamite Entertainment. It being on the cover of Vampirella Year 1, Issue 6, which is currently being written by Christopher Priest and art by, is it Ergon Gundes? Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
You got it.
Yeah. So, and I understand this particular issue actually comes out. It'll actually be out by the same time that this episode comes out. But of course, your cover will come out much later. Care to tell us about how you got?
It comes out like around June, I think.
Okay, so not too far at all. All right, good stuff.
No.
Do you care to tell us how you got the
opportunity? It's going to be fulfilled pretty fast.
Right on.
Okay, awesome. I think there might be a slight delay between our audio and yours, so I'll keep that in mind. Where was that? Okay, Chris, do you mind telling us about like how you got the opportunity to work with Dynamite, like how that came up?
Their president, Nick Barucci, super nice guy. He started dropping in on some of my live streams and was very, very kind. Said that he watched my show, and we struck up a conversation here and there. And one day he was like, "Hey, I've got an idea. Let's just see what kind of crossover appeal there might be. Let's see if your audience would, follow you doing something fun with us, just a little project." So I was like, absolutely, that sounds like a great time. Let's do it. So if I was going to create a cover, I was like, well, the show's called Comic Tropes. I sort of started by talking about more the recurring elements and stuff, and that's what the show was named then. I think it's sort of over the years evolved to just be, whatever, a kind of analysis about comics. But if I was going to do a cover, let's fill it up with all the tropes I can think of, death and homages and sexy women and guest stars and gorillas.
Sure.
Of course, gorillas.
What's funny is my wife is her bachelor's is in art history, and I showed her the cover, and I was like, "Well, babe, what do you think of this? This is pretty sweet." And she's like, "Oh wow, that's really good, man." And he even referenced, I think she said La Piedra, and I was like, "He made a video about that." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" She's like, "Yeah. Do you know who you married?" I'm like, "My bad, girl. I'm sorry."
It's true. That's true. It's an homage, and I was specifically influenced by the versions that have been drawn by John Byrne in an issue of X-Men and George Perez in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Come on, yeah.
But yes, the pose and the idea is a trope in comics. It goes back to being influenced by Michelangelo's La Pieta statue. Yeah. So, I did sort of a live stream on it once, just sort of going through some really famous covers. Another famous one people might remember is the death of Captain Marvel. That's a very very close representation of the pose. Yeah,
for sure.
And Chris, what ties do you have to the character of Vampirella? Were you a fan of Vampirella?
Necessarily. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd made an episode about her at this point, a couple years ago or something. I would say it's not my all-time favorite character, but I really respected the stuff that was coming out from Warren Publishing in the 70s because they had some fantastic artists on that. Guys like Jose Gonzalez that are definitely in a way respected and stuff by a certain fandom, but not as well known as I don't know, a Jack Kirby or more modern, I don't know, a Jim Lee or something, so, but super talented artists were always working on their black and white magazines. And I think that's some of what gave her some more lasting appeal, because just a sexy woman in general in comics are kind of a dime a dozen. This one took it up a notch by, having some really great art.
Chris, can I say I respect the hell out of your marketing, by the way? You've got the Vampirella statue perfectly, placed in your camera setup.
Yeah, that's the Jose Gonzalez, too.
Yeah.
And that's based on the famous cover by Jose Gonzalez, actually.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could see that. I didn't know how it was.
Sure, Chris. Sure.
So yeah, right. What does it feel like to work on a legacy character like Vampirella? And also, how long before you start cosplaying as Forey Ackerman?
I don't. Do I look like him? I don't really
Not
know.
at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just such a generic white guy, but there's like, you add the glasses and the beard and like a little bit more weight, and there's not that many guys I can cosplay as without like culturally appropriating something. So that's not good. No, there is a little bit of pressure, guys. There is, not just like that it's Vampirella, but honestly just anything that's sort of mainstream in general. Because like I've done some comics, but they're more like educational comics, and certainly lots of self-published, more indie stuff. There's very little pressure there, but you want this campaign to be successful because, I want this to potentially show that there's room for podcasts and YouTubers that talk about comics to have opportunities to collaborate here and there on a fun project.
Yeah.
We have to maintain like at arm's length sometimes the stuff that we're reviewing and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean that we can't have friendly relationships with some of these people. And
Sure.
I want it to do well so that it's like, I that's all self-imposed. But yeah, I've put some pressure on myself that I want this to be successful so that there's potential other opportunities for other people.
Yeah. And I think that's what made me most excited about, reaching out and, getting you on the show is that, you're definitely someone I respect from a comic, content creator side, YouTuber, podcaster, and all that. And the fact that you were given this opportunity, not to just endorse a book, right? Like they could have easily just, paired you with an artist to bring your vision to life and slapped your name on it. But the fact that they, let you get really hands-on with the product itself, I thought was a really cool opportunity. And like you said,
It's fun.
if this goes well, like the doors it could open for, other aspiring, artists that also have like, a podcast, YouTube, whatever it may be, like that side hustle that's a little outside of comics but still related. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hope so. Like I'll just privately say like last time I checked the campaign, I think it was just a little shy of like 12,000, and at 20,000 would be like sort of my internal metric of where it would be considered successful. That would be enough.
Okay.
Which I'll also be honest, like I thought it would be a little easier to reach that at first because I've got a decent subscriber base.
Yeah.
What I wasn't factoring in is like when you do a campaign like this, a crowdfunding campaign, putting that news out there, that information out there through your social platforms, how much it gets choked by the various platforms, like Twitter, Instagram. It doesn't matter like where I'm posting, even YouTube. They don't love links going outside of that platform, so that like really, really gets suppressed. And I'm, that's why I'd love to come on a show like this and actually talk about it, because then I'm actually reaching an audience that might be motivated to take a look. Just posting about it is like something where I'm only like it's trickling in how many people get to see that.
Sure.
Chris, you are speaking to the choir. To your point, and for anyone that's listening that might not know about like the behind the scenes stuff when it comes to opportunities like this from a creator side, the minute you start incorporating a call to action, for something like, hey, subscribe to my Patreon or check out this link where I did, whatever, anything that takes the user from its native platform, anything that forces them off Twitter or whatever. It, like you said, the algorithms hate that shit, right? Like it buries it,
like,
and it
Sarah Connor, boom, you're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's what I love about the medium of podcasting is that it's not contingent on the algorithms, right? Like, granted, once you start building a fan base, you don't have to worry about it showing up to someone's feed or whatnot. So I say all that to say I'm looking at your Indiegogo right now, and I have never seen this percentage in my life where the original goal was a very modest, what was it, a modest $1,000, I think, dollars, right?
Yeah, we just put it at 1,000. I think that was mainly just so that we were sure we just quickly crossed a minimum.
Well, you guys are at
like
1,194% over the original goal, which I think is fucking awesome to see, like that turnout and that support. come from you. And it sounds like it's been so successful, it's kind of forced your hand to add additional rewards and tiers and things like that. Well, I guess what have you added? Yeah.
We haven't really added any things. Like those are like all the various comics that Dynamite like allows you to do, or the versions of my cover were there from the beginning. If you're a Comic Tropes viewer and you want to get like some merchandise that's Comic Tropes based, we had that from the beginning too. So like once you order the cover, there are add-ons. You could get like a plush of my mascot or an enamel pin that's pretty nice.
Cool.
That was all there from the beginning. The only thing is that like usually a campaign will sort of like start really strong, taper off, and you might get like a big burst on like the last day, maybe the last 2 days. What we sort of saw instead was like it did start off strong, and then it like was very, very consistently steady right up to what was going to be the end. So we've decided like, okay, clearly people are discovering this a little later. They're not like, and so we extended it. I think it's going to go from like today, the 24th is when we're recording this. It'll go for like another 18 days, maybe something like that, like a little over 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's got 18 days left on the day we're recording, but by the time this episode comes out, people will still have a little bit, just under 2 weeks to fund the campaign and sign up for rewards. Speaking of rewards, man, I'm loving the variety of rewards. You know, obviously you've got your cover available. You got different versions of the cover, black and white. You can get, a virgin cover. But then you start getting into some, I'm assuming what like Dynamite is kind of pitching in, like a 6-foot door poster of Vampirella based on the iconic.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
Not at all.
Okay.
Because I have honestly been looking to buy this Art of Jose Gonzalez hardcover book for years. And I'm like, this might be.
Buddy, why are you sleeping on
my
that,
opportunity.
man? Dude, I think oh, God.
I think they've got it at a very fair price. The
sure.
shipping is reasonable as long as you're in the U.S. I will admit Indiegogo does not make it super friendly outside of the U.S., unfortunately. That's something I'll think about if I do another campaign in the future. But Dynamite is running the campaign itself. I did the art, and it falls on, like the creative person to do the promotion, the marketing, the hustle.
Right. Right.
But like, that's all them, like adding various related Vampirella stuff and Dynamite books that may be of interest to people checking this out.
It's some awesome additional rewards. They got a badass Vampirella statue, a cool-ass bust. It's a lot of awesome stuff that I think people would really enjoy.
Yeah, even if you aren't, say, a Vampirella quote-unquote fan, there is a lot here to dive into. There's a lot of really, like Chris was talking about, there is a legacy of really good art and talent behind this character that you can get a piece of, essentially, if you decide to support. So, I mean,
yeah,
I think it's a good idea.
Hopefully, sorry to talk over you there, Steve.
No, you're good.
Like, hopefully, people get a kick out of the artwork that I've done here and think that that's fun. One nice thing is this is on a comic called Vampirella Year One, written by Christopher Priest. So if you haven't read Vampirella before, while this is issue 6, it's still an overall good jumping on point to understand her origin. And if you have, this is a 6-issue series, so it is giving additional context to like her supporting cast, her origins, her who she is. So it's pretty good in that regard if you're already a Vampirella fan.
Well said. Yep. Well said. And once again, like I said, listeners, you'll have just under 2 weeks to go ahead and support the campaign. Highly recommend it. Help our guy Chris out.
Come on, jump on it.
Yeah, there'll be links. I made it easy for you too. All right, I included a link to the campaign in the show notes, so check that out. Chris, if you don't mind, we've got some questions. Just overall comic questions, man. We'd love to converse about some of these questions we got in regards to comic tropes.
How dare you? I'm only here to sell. I want to see both of you show me like on your phones that you've ordered. No, I love talking comics.
Don't tempt me with a good time, buddy. I'll show you.
Yeah, we'll pull it off.
I'm just kidding around, but let's talk about anything you guys want to.
That's funny, man.
Well, let's go ahead and help the uninitiated out. Let's assume there might be someone tuning in that has no idea what comic tropes is. I mentioned in the beginning, it's dedicated to studying the tropes in comics, and you provide history lessons on various comic topics. But take us back to the beginning. What was the catalyst for launching the YouTube channel? Yeah, what was the catalyst for launching the YouTube channel?
Oh, totally fair question. Basically, I just needed a project because the company that I'd moved across the country here to work at had a good 3 years there. Massive company, though. They did some restructuring. I got downsized out of a job. Now, I didn't know a whole lot of people here in the Pacific Northwest, and I knew it was likely that it was going to take me a little while until I found my next job. But I'm kind of a workaholic. I really like to be busy, and I decided this was an excellent time to start a project that would keep me busy and what would be fun for me. There's nothing I'm more passionate about than comic books. So I just decided that was an easy time to pull the trigger. That's what it was, just to fill the time.
Do you remember your first exposure to comics, or what was the moment that made you a fan? What's your earliest comic book memory?
There would be sort of two things there, because my earliest exposure was not necessarily when I became a fan. I know that growing up I had a few comic books. I know that I had a Smurfs comic. I know I had a Winnie the Pooh comic, and I know I had a random issue of The Flash where he went up against Gorilla Grodd.
Nice.
And I liked those, but none of them were a huge impression. They were just sort of along with my children's books at the time, whatever, what's his name, Wikipedia Brown, or no, it wouldn't have been
Encyclopedia Brown.
Encyclopedia Brown.
Oh, I'm there.
I'm updating it.
Oh, dude.
No. That's the. I just remembered that's the screen name of one of the guys on the Mr. Sunday movie. So I literally, I'm bad at names.
I'm waiting on the Netflix updated Encyclopedia Brown series called Wikipedia Brown now. That sounds awesome.
Well, I think those Aussies took it, buddy.
Yeah, there's somebody with that name. That's a good. Sorry, Mason. Anyway, so I had those, but I remember the time when I really got into them was, this is still super young Chris. And but I had a paper route. This is probably right around 5th grade for me. And I would sometimes stop at this convenience store that was at the end of my paper route and maybe get a candy bar or something with this money that I'm collecting. And then one day I saw a spinner rack of comics, and they had a Transformers comic. Now young Chris really liked Transformers, and I was like, oh my God, there's more Transformers than just the cartoon. So I picked that up, and that was very eye-opening to me. And because that convenience store was so close, the next week I went to see if there was more. I didn't know the schedule that they came out on or anything like that. I saw a G.I. Joe comic, and when I read that, I have to admit, the G.I. Joe comic was much, much better. It had good art and a great writer, Larry Hama.
Sure.
No matter whether you're into G.I. Joe or not, it was and still is a legit good comic. So I started getting that for a couple weeks, and pretty soon I was well, I just crave more. And I think that the first superhero I picked up at the time was the first issue of Kraven's Last Hunt in Spider-Man.
Wow.
Some artwork by Mike Zeck. That made a big impression on me. So that was when I started really getting excited about comics. It all spread very quickly from there.
Dude, I totally relate to that. When I was a kid, my dad was stationed in San Diego. He was in the Navy. And I had a slew of random ass comics just like that, where I had an Alf comic. And
I remember the Alf comic.
Yeah, and I was just this is funny, man. I was like, okay, is this what comic books are? That's cool. And then we moved, and there was a comic book store, and my mom took me, and I bought an X-Men classic, the reprints of the old issues they started releasing in the 90s.
Absolutely.
And I was like, what? This is comic books? Are you kidding me? There's so much soap opera, and there's aliens, and who's this girl that can walk through stuff, and why is this dude made of steel punching dragons? I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's I get it. It's funny, man.
Well, within a year of reading the comics off the spinner rack, I was lucky. My mom was kind of supportive. I was I'm starting at something like issue 27 of Transformers. How do I get the other ones? And she looked in, there was no internet, just to be clear. I'm old. And so she looked in the yellow pages and found a local-ish comic book store and drove me to it so that I could discover back issues. And that's when I quickly discovered black and white books too, Ninja Turtles and Usagi Yojimbo, and so that would have been mid '80s, just a little before their cartoon came out. It was eye opening. It was really exciting. So
okay,
that's when I became a fan.
So hyper fast forward to it'd be 2016. You decided to start your YouTube channel because you wanted to fill in time. You said you're someone that likes to stay busy.
Yeah.
So what made you pick YouTube as a platform, and why comics? Specifically comic tropes, which I think is a very interesting topic to cover.
Kind of you'd ask. So basically, YouTube, because up until then, I already had been like doing just a traditional podcast with some friends for about 7 years, and I was just ready to do something that was a little bit like, but that was about like genre TV type shows and stuff, you know, sci-fi and fantasy and stuff, and that was fun, and it did well. But I was ready to sort of like just do my own thing a little bit more at the time, and I thought that because I'm talking about a visual medium, YouTube made a little more sense. Plus, it looked like it would be easier to monetize. So, like, those were some of the decisions. Like, and it took a while to monetize, but that wasn't the main goal. It was just like, there's the potential for that, and it's not hard. It wasn't a hard hurdle to cross. So that's sort of why I decided to do it on YouTube and do it, you know, in the way I did.
Okay. So,
and I called it. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot. You said, why did I call it Comic Tropes? And I'll be honest, the first episodes you see, I don't really have a script or anything. I'm literally just sort of grabbing a comic and sort of riffing on it, like looking at the recurring elements. That was all. I didn't have a big plan yet because I also didn't know if this would grow. So I didn't come up with the show name until I finished that first episode. I was talking about Chris Claremont's like recurring dialogue and plot type ideas. So I called it Comic Tropes. Might not make as much sense now because I think like my show eventually sort of grew to just be broader analysis, but you know, whatever. That's how it started.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, what has been some of the best methods of engagement regarding the community? Has the spinner rack or your inking and drawing sessions been the best way of maintaining a connection with the community?
It's evolved as the show's grown. Initially, it was kind of replying to comments on YouTube. At a certain point, that like sort of got a little more unwieldy, and Patreon for a little while was a little more convenient. And these days, it's like that as well as sort of social media. But I like drawing, so I used to occasionally, you know what I would do is on Comic Tropes, I would do Inktober.
Yep.
And for the first 2 years, like I was drawing every single day on October and doing a show, and that was really good engagement. And then it got to a point where in the third year, it actually sort of switched because my channel had gotten bigger and the live streams now got way less views than an edited episode. So it sort of tanked the algorithm for a little while. It took me a little while to realize that is what had happened. So I eventually started a second channel where I do a weekly live show talking about the comic book news of the week, doing like quick reviews of the comics that have come out. That's on the channel Pros and Cons. It's smaller, but that's a really nice way that I can engage very closely. Like I have the live chat up and I can talk back and forth with my most engaged viewers there.
Did you could you have ever foreseen the future of your comic book footprint where we are now?
Of my channel, you're saying?
Yeah.
Probably not when I first started it, to be honest. It was just a project meant to keep me busy and like a topic that keeps me entertained. And then somewhere, you know, like when, you know, YouTube sends me like a silver play button because I crossed 100,000 subscribers, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, maybe this could grow. Maybe someday I could like, you know, make a living doing this. And I can't, and I wouldn't say I quite can yet. Maybe with a few different changes, but I'm just really sort of conservative about how I'm super cautious about like, you know, just leaving a job behind. So I have a part-time job now.
The struggle is real. We understand.
Yeah, you're talking to the right dudes that are like,
we get
this
that.
is a guaranteed check.
Yeah.
I don't blame you at all. So when would you say was your, was there an interview or maybe a convention or something, like a moment that made you feel confident that you were on the right path in regards to like among like the comic book community and like the comic creators that you looked up to? Was like a moment of like, oh damn, they're seeing me, you know, I've got a spotlight on me in the right, you know, in the right way.
Once I crossed 5,000 subscribers, it started picking up pretty significantly and regularly. And, you know, like basically somewhere around like I'll say 2018, going to something like New York Comic Con. That was like just before the pandemic, and I got recognized a lot, and I was like, oh, like I didn't expect that. I just sincerely, and yeah, I it's not like I can walk into a comic book store and definitely get recognized, but if I go to a convention, I get stopped a good amount by people saying that they watch the show or asking for a picture, and that's really flattering. You know, it's kind of fun to have like this safe environment where you get to be a little bit of a celebrity. That's cool. But like outside of that, you're just yourself. It's kind of nice. You know, somewhere around there.
And speaking of conventions and, you know, celebrities, you've, you know, in the world of comic books, you've definitely interviewed your fair share of like, you know, people that we would deem celebrities in this comic space. I'm talking like comic creators like Scott Snyder. You've interviewed Daniel Warren Johnson, Todd McFarlane, and, you know, the list goes on. Do you have any like interesting stories or takeaways, or do you have any interactions with like comic creators that, all right, I'm sorry, let me ask that. Do you have a favorite interaction with a creator?
Oh, favorite. I mean, they're all a blast. I love doing interviews. I don't do them too often because also YouTube doesn't like really reward those. Like for whatever reason, it just doesn't love the interviews as much as the edited episodes. Yeah. So I know that I'm going to like take a hit in viewers. So I only do them when I'm kind of excited to talk to somebody. So they're all fun. I will say that like, I told you guys that an early comic that got me excited about comics was G.I. Joe. So getting to talk to Larry Hama, the writer and really like creator of all the important characters there, that was a big deal for me. Also, he's this guy that has been in comics long enough that, you know, he apprenticed with Wally Wood, and he sort of knows that previous generation of creators that aren't really here with us anymore. So getting to pick his brain and learn, you know, some of his story and some of the people that he learned from, like Bernie Krigstein, that was really, that meant a lot to me on a personal level because I was a fan of Larry, and he has this connection to people that we can't talk to anymore. So that meant a lot to me. That one was special to me.
That's cool. And I guess, and you know, with 6+ years of hosting the channel and, you know, the various topics that you've I mean, your deep dives are great, man. Like you leave really no stone unturned, and I've walked away plenty of times having learned a lot. Is there like any video that maybe resonated with you in the sense of like learning something just brand new, or having like a light bulb moment of like, wow, that really changes the way I view comics? Like, do you have a video or a topic that has done that?
I would say a bunch of them, to be honest, Botter, just because there's a bunch of like trivia that's just like bubbling around in my head at any given time. But when I decide to do more or less a deep dive on a creator and try to look at what makes their technique a little unique or special, something like that, I also go like, well, it would take too many weeks to do an 1.5-hour episode, which I easily could about pretty much any of them. I want to keep it to somewhere between 15 to 25 minutes. So I have to sort of like hone in a little bit more on like an angle, just like one angle that I can like, and then like, you know, if there's stuff left over, maybe I'll revisit that creator at some point. And I think I always end up learning something because I always try to go beyond what my initial thoughts are and start pulling any interviews that they've done in like magazines or online and try to like familiarize myself with what they've already talked about and if they've already interpreted some of this stuff. I don't want to ignore that. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that's my process. And I usually do, because I'm reading those interviews, I usually do learn a little something new there.
What's the last, I guess, if you can recall, what's the last piece of trivia that you were just like, holy shit, I didn't even know that. I'm going to keep that one in the pocket, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
I'm asking
that's a great question.
I'm asking because I need one for next time I'm at a convention surrounded by like comic nerds, right? Help me out, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sort of trying, like, I'll be honest, as soon as I finish an episode, it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind, because I'm always working on several moving forward, and I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting that I've come across there.
Well, while you're thinking about it, okay,
yeah, there we go. Yeah, feel free to interrupt us when you think of it.
Yeah, just chime in when you get something. I gotta ask, because you were talking about being a workaholic, and I can understand that. And the cool thing about your channel is how you're really transparent with the fans and the community, man. What has kept you going through burnout? Because that's a very real thing too.
Yeah. Especially with 500 plus videos, like YouTube, right? Like editing audio for podcasting it's time consuming, but it ain't video, right? It's not exactly video per se. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, I remember, like I said, I did like an audio podcast for 7 years, and I would edit that and like balancing the levels and cutting out the ums and the ahs whenever I could. Is time consuming. It is more time consuming doing specifically a comic book thing, because say I was reviewing a movie or a TV show, I can drop in a clip for maybe 15 seconds or something while I'm talking. And that's great. You know, like that's a good chunk of time each time you could do that. But when you are talking about a comic book, that's a static image. And I don't always want it to just be there. I want a little bit of visual interest. So, you know, you maybe are putting in sometimes a background that's moving, or maybe you're just doing a small pan or zooming in a little. You want
You're
like
talking to a
couple
broadcast journalist for the military, so I get what you're saying.
And it's very time consuming. It's very time consuming. So like most of the time for my videos, it's the editing that takes the most time. That's very, very difficult. But, you know, it is what it is. I sort of lost the thread, I think.
I was going to say, what kept you going through burnout?
Just understanding myself better as I got older and realizing that I was sort of facing that burnout, trying to tell, like, my viewers where I'm at, and being willing as I got, like, a little more established to every once in a while, take that extra week to produce it so that it's a little better and it's not like, you know, half-assed, and sometimes giving myself episodes that are easier in between the bigger ones. Like if I find a weird Golden Age character to review, those are really fun and not as hard, because it's usually like, you know, a 6-page story or something, and I'm just like reacting to almost every panel, and I'm like just sort of riffing on it and joking around. Those are fun for me and a lot easier. So sometimes you just give yourself something like that in between.
I'm gonna hop on C's question here,
How
because
dare you?
He made a really good point that you are very open and honest with your community. And one thing I highly respect is your honesty about, like, you know, your mental health and just, you know, the grind of it all.
Butter's like, it's something I could never do.
You know, and it definitely speaks to me, right? As someone who's been podcasting this long, and I'll have my bouts with burnout and doubt and, you know, all this stuff here. I was curious, like, how has comics, I want to say saved you, but that sounds so dramatic, but how has, like, comics and the community you've built, like, how has that helped you in your journey of, like, you know, mental health and things like that?
Well, it does help. You know, storytelling can sometimes get me out of my own head. You know, sometimes comics can be an escape, and that's valid. Sometimes I do like reading something a little deeper, but that still stimulates a different part of my brain than just focusing too much on my own situation. So comics are good in that regard. Analyzing them takes, you know, some mental energy and takes that off of, like, focusing on whatever's bothering me. And then there is a bit of a social aspect to either people reacting to whatever I put out or doing my live streams, where I do a weekly live stream for 2 hours, and I'm interacting with the audience the whole time, and that's a very fun social experience for me. That definitely keeps me excited about comics, to get recommendations from other people, or for someone to say, like, wait, I didn't know that, and I'm like, oh, am I talking about something that not everybody knows? Let's dive into that a little bit more. That's fun. You know, it's fun to talk about what you know, or talk about yourself. It's easy.
Ask Botter, he knows.
Yeah.
I might be playing.
I would just say that, like, you know, doing something analytical or something creative, like, you know, just I like to draw as well, are both things that can, like, just sort of, like, keep you busy and get you a little bit out of your own headspace sometimes. You know, and you just have to know, like, yourself, which you know yourself as you get older. And I know that, you know, it's important for me personally, like, being on a certain medication helps me not dwell on things. It doesn't, like, change exactly how I think, but it keeps me from dwelling on the bad things. but also eating healthy, exercising, and socializing. Those three things, like, you really can't ignore. Like, those all really do help. And those don't come easy to me. I do think of myself as an introvert, but I force myself to do those things to try to take care of myself.
Well, it's definitely appreciated, man. I've always wanted to visit Japan. And
oh, sure.
And I've been wondering, have you ever thought about doing comic book characters based off your cats the way Junji Ito does?
Talk about a segue.
We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later.
Can I say that segue?
We'll talk about it later.
Hell of a segue.
Look. No, all kidding aside, though, I got to know, where did your love of Japanese comic books, manga, all that stuff come from? And how does it inform your work?
Well, to me, it's all comics. It's all still sequential storytelling. Basically pen and ink, or maybe digital, but you get my impression. Right. To me, there might be some cultural cues in the storytelling, but overall, to me, it's all comics. I mean, you're going to find some of those same differences. I like to read, Belgian and British comics and things like that. I like to read comics from other countries to compare and contrast. There's a lot of similarities, is all I'll say. And then I also, even looking at like old stuff or independent stuff compared to modern mainstream stuff, can have just as big differences as just like looking at, like the latest issue of Batman versus the latest issue of, I don't know, Chainsaw Man,
right.
So, to me, the thing I like about manga over here is it's very bingeable, very easy to they tend to bring it over after it's been going for a little while, and they tend to bring over a lot of the series that are going to appeal to us a little bit more. Like, once you go over to Japan, you realize there's a lot more comics, and most of those don't get brought over here because there's probably cultural differences where they don't think that there's the audience for certain romance comics or certain workplace or sports comics. So the things they bring over are likely to have broad appeal with sci-fi or something like that, or supernatural, and it's just very bingeable. So that's really fun to get into.
Yeah, I just started reading Chainsaw Man, and that shit is bonkers. I love it so much.
It's a lot darker than I expected it to be.
No kidding.
I thought it was going to be sort of tongue-in-cheek and funny and stuff, and very quickly you're like, wow, this is actually a really dark story.
True story.
With people betraying each other and treating each other kind of bad.
I just want to go ahead and compliment. I'm smiling because I want to compliment C on one hell of a segue. He knew I wanted to pick your brain about manga in Japan and talk about a way to insert it and get us on this topic. Chris, I wanted to say that one of the most, I guess, conscious exposures I had to getting you on my radar. I don't know if you did a video or you just gave a shout out to this manga that I loved, and I felt like no one else had heard about it or read it, was Pluto. You constantly kind of bring up
Oh my God, that was like something like my third or fourth episode ever.
Okay, all right. So it must have been that early. So I guess
nice
love
flex. Nice flex. Okay, yes. Butter. Okay, we get it.
So I love that you champion, both well-known manga that could be found in Shonen Jump, but also some stuff that might require you to do your homework
for sure.
And I'll say that I also follow you on Twitter, and I think you're a good Twitter follow. You always pose really good questions. It always gets good engagement and good responses. I think you recently had one about Marvel manga, and I responded to it sharing something. And I on the topic, and I'm bringing this all together, manga and Twitter, and recently last week there was kind of that thread going around about that picture of the manga bookshelf at, I think it was a Barnes and Nobles. It was overflooded with manga, and someone was, whatever the tweet was angry. It's internet anger, right? Look how much manga's on this, bookshelf being pushed by Books A Million, and look at the American comics. It was this little sliver or something like that.
Jabs.
I know, what I enjoy about you is that you don't partake in any hot takes and needless sensationalism. But I am curious, what is your take on this kind of played out argument of manga outselling, American comics, and it being the death of American comics and all that bullshit that you hear? You got an official take you'd like to share?
I'm not worried about it putting American comics out of business. I'll say that. There's a lot of manga that I adore. It's some great stuff. To me, it's all comics. And if that's that's somebody's entry point into comics, and even if they just stay with that, that's fine. You know, like that is still part of our industry too. You know, like they're publishing it here, they're distributing it here, they're selling it in our stores here. That's fine with me. Is like, you know, something like Chainsaw Man outselling Batman? Maybe. Yeah, I'd have to double check the numbers. It probably does. At the same time, they're really just, there's so much to go into in terms of the presentation. You know, I'm not worried about American comics going anywhere because, first of all, just suppose, like devil's advocate, Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, IDW, they all went out of business tomorrow, right? They just all of a sudden, whoops, they all made a big mistake and they all went out of business. There's still going to be people that want to create indie comics or web comics. You know, there's still going to be, it's a low barrier to entry if you can be creative and write and draw. Like you can create something and self-publish it theoretically. So that's not necessarily going away. And then when you look at the bigger stuff, like Marvel and DC's characters also aren't going to go anywhere. I mean, that just to keep the intellectual property alive for making into movies and toys and stuff, they're going to like want to put it in other things. Like, so I'm just not worried about that. You know, like if they were losing money, like just nothing but losing money, they'd make some changes. I don't think that American comics are especially motivated to sell much better, unfortunately, because they could. I really think that they could. I think with a few changes to both distribution and presentation, there's very little that would prevent Marvel from, say, gathering together a classic run, we'll say Daredevil Born Again, or even something like, you know, more modern, like, I don't know, the most recent Flash run by Jeremy Adams, whatever it could be, like, you know, a solid run that fans love. You could put that in black and white, put that in like a tankobon format and sell it for about the same price. And I bet it would appeal to a lot of new readers, you know, because they could binge one whole story. And it would like be very cost effective. Marvel and DC don't have a lot of like financial incentive to try the new things. They don't care enough. And I'm not trying to be mean to them. They literally just don't. You know, they could bring over, you know, the manga versions of Moon Knight and Spider-Man and Deadpool and stuff that they've done over the years, and they just don't have a lot of motivation to bother.
That is a bucket list manga right there. The Marvel, the Moon Knight manga that has yet to be translated or released would be awesome. Yeah. I'm glad I got to hear your opinion on that, Chris. Thank you. One more question on the topic of manga. And that is, aside from, you know, I got to hear you say that Pluto's among your favorite. What are some of your other favorite manga picks? And do you have any recommendations for anyone that's been hesitant into getting into manga that loves American comics?
Oh, absolutely. I'd recommend plenty of it. And I would usually tailor my recommendation to what I know that person likes. You know, if they're going to tell me that they like, you know, that they're not into superheroes or supernatural and stuff, I go, well, that's okay. You know, like maybe, you know, another book by Naoki Urasawa, like Monster or something like that. You know, that is nothing supernatural. It's about like, you know, a doctor on the run that's been framed for like murder. Or there's, you know, all sorts of, there's so many different genres there. Like Slam Dunk is one I'm really enjoying right now. And I'm not a huge basketball fan, but Slam Dunk is a really entertaining, super fast-paced manga, and it's really funny too. So, you know, there's a million places I could recommend. These days, some of the ones I'm enjoying the most are like, you know, Spy Family. Berserk is sort of back, so that's one I'm kind of passionate about. There's so many though. You know, there's so many. It's hard to know where to start unless I know what somebody else likes. But there are classics. You know, Akira is a classic for a reason. Yeah. It's a huge epic, but boy, that art is gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
On the topic of recommendations, Chris, how do you go about? It sounds like I'm getting a little bit of a preview, but I want to hear it in your words. How do you go about recommending comics to people? Like, you know, whatever, American comics specifically to people? Because I'll say the man to my left right here introduced me to probably my go-to way now, which is asking, like, you know, what's some of your favorite movies and figuring out like a genre. Do you prescribe to that? Subscribe to that? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if somebody's like, I've never really read comics before, I've only like read one or two, but tell me a little bit more about comics. I'm like, absolutely, yeah. Like, what books or movies do you like, or tell me what media you like, and from there, I could come up with a solid recommendation. If it's like horror, cool, but if you tell me that you like a really specific like horror movie, I could probably think up off the top of my head like a specific comic that might be really good that's got some similar vibes, or maybe you just like rom-coms or something. I don't know, like there's gonna be something I can recommend, but I definitely think that's the way to do it. I'm not just gonna go Mouse and Watchmen are critically acclaimed, you must start with those two comics, you must, and then you'll read Dark Knight Returns. Like, I don't know anything about Batman, you'll read it and like it.
You know what, Chris,
it's acclaimed.
Chris, I'm gonna put you on the spot because you brought up if someone names a horror movie, you could probably give some recommendations. So you give him a horror title. Throw him a horror title.
You know what's funny? He was talking, and you mentioned Washington, and I thought about Twin Peaks, and I was like, Blood on the Tracks is a manga that was suggested to me because I'm such a Twin Peaks stan, and it's like, dude, this is like a psychological horror that you have to get into. So this is hard because I know Chris does enjoy horror films because I've seen some of the Inktober stuff, and I know
that's
for
true,
a fact
I do.
You dig Jason.
I do,
especially some of the more funnier, I guess, entries into the franchise, such as Jason. I call it Jason Takes Manhattan. It's like the Muppets took Manhattan. Why not? The man behind the mask. I don't know.
True.
I would say okay, something like Insidious. That's something new, right?
Okay.
I'm in my 40s,
okay.
and I'm like, you ask me what horror movie I like, I'm gonna be like, oh, dude, have you seen?
No, that's okay.
Society? That's a badass film.
All right, yeah. Well, let's run with Insidious.
So,
Chris, give us some recommendations.
You tell me Insidious, and I think of like sort of supernatural haunting type stuff. So I would say that maybe Scott Snyder and Jock's Witches might be one, especially with that getting adapted soon to Amazon. That might be an entry point. I think Harrow County might be like sort of a similar, like really good horror comic there. And if I had a little bit of quiet time to just sit down, I'm a very visual person, so I might like sort of write some notes to myself. I'd probably think of some other like appropriate ones off, like if I could do that. Yeah.
Okay. But there's, I'm gonna throw you for a loop on this one. All right. This is not a horror movie, but I'm gonna throw one of my favorite movies. It's a sci-fi thriller that came out in 2012. Chronicle, which was I think directed by Ryan.
I got you, B. Akira.
That is the easy.
That
one.
was Josh Trank, right?
Thank you so much, Josh
directed
Trank. Yeah.
Chronicle.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where like only sort of like one person is, or like three people like have superpowers, and like what that means in the real world. So I'd look to sort of deconstructionist takes of superheroes. I'd probably recommend books by Grant Morrison and Alan Moore that sort of deconstruct some of those ideas. Depending if they like really like sort of a dark nature or something. There's Kill or Be Killed by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips that might be an interesting way to go. It's not quite
good.
The same.
See, this guy's
I know he's good.
This guy's good. He's good. All right, Chris, you passed. I don't know why I was trying to check your nerd card. Obviously, I embarrassed myself on my show, but you did it.
No, but that's fun.
Ones.
I think that's fun, and I think that like probably somebody out there listening, like something popped in their head at the same time, and they're like, "Oh, why didn't Chris say that?" And it's like, well, give me 20 minutes of quiet time, maybe I would have.
Yeah, I put him on the spot, folks, and he passed the test.
It's good.
And I'm going to continue to put you on the spot because this is a question I love asking a lot of our guests, but specifically, specifically if they are an artist themselves, and obviously you fit that role, Chris. And I'm curious to hear because you've tossed out a few names. I heard you mention John Byrne, of course, George Perez,
Alan Moore.
Yeah, you mentioned Alan Moore and Larry Hama, of course. If you had to create a comic Mount Rushmore based on your favorite comic artist or comic icons or people that you deem comic icons, who would be on that Mount Rushmore?
Okay, that's a good challenge. Probably Will Eisner. I think he's pretty influential. So I would throw him up there. I'd want something modern, and like Daniel Warren Johnson excites me like nobody else.
Hell yeah.
Even though we just talked about it, I'd also put like, I think one of the greatest creators these days is Naoki Urasawa. I just think he has excellent storytelling chops, so I'll put him up there. And like, now it gets even harder because there's like all I can think of is like, like all the people that I won't get to list that'll like sort of like hurt me spiritually. So this is like a very painful question. But maybe somebody that excited me early on when I was getting into comics, like Mike Zeck, who I think was like just really, really exciting and rock solid. Yeah, I'll put him too. But there's just so many now that I'm like not listing. It hurts. It hurts.
That is a solid list, man. Yeah, super cool. Solid list. All right, I'm gonna give you a chance to. We're gonna get you off the hot seat, Chris. And I want to talk about something that a topic that is more so a bragging right for you, a very unique bragging right at that. You have a very rare bragging right among comic fans and comic creators in that you were once a real life superhero going by the moniker of Omega. You participated.
Yes.
If you're watching the video version, this is where Chris is like, I think I got to wrap up, guys.
He's like, oh, guys, look at the time.
Okay. Look, you went by Omega. You participated in numerous patrols and outreach missions as part of the Seattle, Washington-based Rain City superhero movement. And I'm curious, man, very straightforward. What sticks out to you about that time, and what was the motivation to don a costume and fight the good fight?
Well, when I moved out here for that new job, I didn't really know anybody, except I had interviewed Phoenix Jones. And we'd stayed in touch because he knew I could draw, so he was always sort of getting me to come up with designs for stuff, so that's fair. He's an entertaining guy. He's a little chaotic in his like organization of his life, but he was very entertaining. He's very charismatic.
And for the uninitiated, Chris, real quick, for the uninitiated, Phoenix Jones being the head
He's pretty much the premier like real life superhero. If you Google real life superhero, Phoenix got a lot of publicity there. And I think some of that is because he really focused on trying to break up fights as compared to just sort of putting on a suit and walking around and like shaking hands or giving out homeless handouts. He legit wanted to break up fights and solve crimes. And he had a background, he's a professional MMA fighter.
Okay.
So he's definitely very capable. At the time that I moved out, not only did I know him, but I was in much better shape at the time. I'd been studying Krav Maga for about 3 years. I went to a personal trainer every day for like an hour, and then during my lunch break, I was doing the insanity workout at work so I would work out for 2 hours a day and do like Krav Maga. It was crazy. Like I was in much better shape at that point in my life. So I felt capable of like going out with him. And at first I just sort of went out more as like a guest. And I don't know what to say. Like, I sort of started buying into the hype and drinking the Kool-Aid and going like, yeah, maybe we can like really inspire people by like wearing these outlandish costumes and doing good deeds and, getting press. Like maybe the average person will be kinder or something. I thought it was worth a try. And so I did that for about a year. I did that for like a year, dressing up in a superhero suit, like bulletproof jacket and stuff, and we would, chase down drunk drivers and help people that were like, getting in fights from when the bars closed, helping people that got lost in crowds and stuff, giving emergency aid for people that would like fall down or get hurt. Wow. And it was pretty wild, honestly. It was pretty dramatic stuff. It was legit. It was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy. Definitely got in a lot of fights and stuff.
Damn.
Scrappy.
My man, Chris is not to be fucked with, man. No. All right. I might run a successful comic YouTube channel, but you don't want these hands, okay? That's what I'm hearing. Chris, I
put on weight, but I definitely feel capable in a fight. I'm sincere. Like, yeah, I feel very capable. And you do it enough, and your adrenaline doesn't get up as much, so you're able to just make smart decisions. Cool. Most fights are very, very quick. But more of the stuff I was doing, to be honest, was some of these guys were looking for fights. You could tell that they had a chip on their shoulder. There was one guy, I don't want to name names even, like even if
That's
using
fine.
the superhero
Yeah, you don't
names,
have
I
to do
might
that.
tell a comic someday and like sort of use placeholder names, but there was a guy that was always trying to bring around like knives, and we were like, no, you can't do that. We're walking around in masks. If a police officer sees like you with like, you know, a concealed weapon, we're all done. You can't do that. Like we knew what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do. Some of them would be really quick to pull a taser out, and I'd always be like, you don't need to do that. Like they didn't use it, but they'd pull it out and like aim it at someone. I'm like, put that shit away. What are you doing? There were times where we threw fists, but like I was just not about like carrying weapons around. Or I would like, you know, I remember one of the first nights I went out was like on New Year's Eve. Okay. Huge, tons and tons of people downtown partying and stuff. And there was a guy who only spoke Spanish, and he couldn't find his girlfriend. Now, I speak terrible Spanish, but I did go to college and have to get, like, you know, 3 semesters and got signed off. So I was able to communicate with him enough to find out what was going on. And I said, give me your number, and I'm going to keep my eye out because we're just walking around. And you know what? Like, about an hour and a half later, I saw a girl in a subway that really matched the description, and I went inside and was able to talk to her, and it was her, and called the guy, and got them reunited. And he'd already talked to the police, but the police didn't find her. Like, and I was really proud of myself that I did. That was just, you know, like one little thing, like, because it didn't all have to be fights. And when I talked to people like that, the other guys wouldn't really do this, but I'd take my mask off. I didn't really care about the secret identity aspect so much. It was a look, you know, but I wanted them to be able to see that I was like a real person, not like some weirdo. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, it's funny there, not to reduce the, you know, sincerity of this moment, but when you were talking about that guy that was trying to bring weapons, and you're like, what are you doing? All I thought of was that episode of The Tick where Big Shot is the guy, and he's like, guns and superheroes don't mix, friend. Seek professional help. And then he leaves Big Shot with Arthur, of all people. And Arthur's like, are you going to be okay? And he's like, Dad, why didn't you love me? And he like just hugs him. Just tears coming from his eyes. It's so good.
I love the way he says his brain works, man. That was awesome.
I know Chris likes The Tick as well, you know, but
I do.
All right.
Yeah. Ben Edlund grew up in a couple towns over from me. He's the guy that created The Tick, and I got to you know, meet him several times when those first couple issues were coming out, because he would do signings at the comic store I went to. NEC was who published it. So that was nice. I got to meet him a bunch then. It was nice.
Cool.
So
it was inspiring.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of inspiration, I was going to say, if you wanted to give, I guess, any one piece of advice to an aspiring YouTuber, maybe that's listening right now, podcaster, or anybody, based on something you wish you'd have known prior to starting your journey, what would it be?
Okay. Be patient. Have good thumbnails and good episode description. You know? And like legit, just like do Google search to see like what words are trending and stuff like that, and find ways to work them in when you can. Have nice clean thumbnails. Like it sounds little, but like honestly, like that's the stuff that catches people's eye when you're scrolling through and can potentially help you with the algorithm. The other thing I'd let people know is, depends on what kind of a channel you want to do. Unfortunately, Google and YouTube kind of reward a negative word. Like if you say failure or worst, oh my God, that gets showed to so many more people.
That's so depressing.
Interesting. Wow.
It is a little depressing because I also don't want to I want to play the game a little bit, but I'm not going to put it in every episode. Like that would just be crazy. Like the worst reason to love this creator.
It's like worst podcast I've ever been on. It's like a picture of me and Potter. Like,
no,
Well, I was thinking the next month our listeners are going to notice the worst reasons why you should listen to this podcast. The
fails.
worst interview with XYZ. Potter, Jesus Christ, you have to take it to the extreme. I got you.
But you got to know that, like, they'll sort of like they sort of reward stuff like that. Not
interesting
always, but you know, my most viewed video is one where I critiqued one of Jack Kirby's inkers that I didn't personally care about. I never expected that to blow up the way it did. And it's probably because I said something like, I don't remember the exact title anymore, but I think I had either worst or failure or something like that. Ruined? I think that was the word I used.
It was ruined, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which
that's some.
I look back and I'm like, well, geez, if I knew it was going to be that popular, I might have been less harsh, honestly. That's not like what I wanted to be known for, but you can't, like, I try to be very positive with my channel. There's so many good things to recommend. But I also, like, even when I'm recommending something, I say, like, here's something that I didn't love about it. I try to give a nuanced perspective on it. Sometimes I will look at stuff that I don't love. And because, you know, you got to have some perspective. What's good, what's bad. But I don't focus on that too much. It's a little too bad that that's the stuff that ends up being the most popular. A little too bad.
That comes through, Chris, though. I feel every time I watch your content, and I have an unbiased source in my wife who also sits on the couch, and while she's reading a novel, her eyes will dart up to the TV every time and just, you know, listen and be like, huh, like that. It's the vibe you always give off is one of a positive vibe. And it's an environment I feel of learning, right? I never feel like I'm tuning into some edgelord who's trying to be like, well, let me tell you guys, like what you made in reference in the past, like it's acclaimed like this, you know, it's like, no, it's like, no, it's comics, you know, that's why you should like it, period, dot, you know, it's
and on a more like fundamental level, see, it's like, I think storytelling in general is what helps us understand the human condition and relate to each other a little bit more. I think that, you know, like there's so many reasons to have differences with each other, but arts can like unite us. You know, music is something like, you know, we could have such different politics or different cultural, you know, upbringings, but we might both like really just dig the same song because that's just music. And hopefully storytelling can help there too sometimes. You know, or can at least give us like, oh, okay, this person thinks that. I thought that, and I didn't like. I've never talked to somebody that like had that same viewpoint, but that makes me feel more connected to that person. There's a lot of positives to storytelling in general. I think it's very, very valuable. It doesn't have to be a positive story. It just can connect us to each other.
Look, Chris and you and I could talk about the intricacies of Joseph Campbell for hours if we. I feel like Botter is chomping at the bit here.
Well,
I'm champing at the bit. Champing. Not chomping.
Well, my question is, have you ever hesitated in releasing a video? Like, do you have any videos that you refuse to release because they don't meet a certain quality or they're not, you know, they're a little more negative? Like,
not necessarily, because you have to get pretty far along in the process, and I kind of know what I'm doing by the time, you know, like I'm recording, because I've like scripted it and then I've edited it, so I've got an opportunity to cut certain things out. Here's where I do hold back is when I'm going to talk about a creator that I'm an especially big fan of, I hold back on those forever because I'm like, oh my God, I want to do this topic justice. I want people to like be as excited as I am, or what. I usually don't think, what if the creator sees this? I can't really let myself do that, but I can't help it on some of my the ones I'm a really big fan of. I just can't help it. So like I get a little nervous on a couple of them here and there.
Okay. And I wanted to tie it back to Vampirella and the campaign and the whole reason you're here. What if you had to give someone advice on, you know, launching a campaign or Indiegogo or Kickstarter, whatever it may be, specifically like a comic one? Now, granted, you know, your campaign still has a couple of days left, so maybe this question is better saved for later. But being in the middle of it, like, what advice do you got?
That's an interesting question, Botter. Fortunately, I've also, you know, supported some Kickstarter comics, and I've had some friends run Kickstarters, so I've seen a few things. This is my only campaign so far. I would say get people sort of aware of it before you even launch the campaign. You know, that could just be like launching a page saying coming soon with some details about it. It would be using whatever social networks you have, as well as sucking up your ego and reaching out to people you're friendly with to say, like, you know, are you comfortable giving this a plug? I don't like asking people for favors. It makes me very uncomfortable, but I do want this to be successful. So you know, I've reached out to some creators. Like, I'm like, you know, hey, Tom King, like, not that we know each other that well. We've talked like once. Would you be willing to give this a retweet? And he's like, sure, nerd. But he did retweet it. And like, that's reaching a bunch of new people, you know, reaching out to, you know, shows that like yours and stuff like that. I'm not comfortable just saying like, I want to plug this. Can I please use your platform? I'm not comfortable, but honestly, it is the kind of stuff that's going to help, because we talked about it. Like, you know, if I post to something like Twitter or YouTube, whatever it might be, and post that link, not everybody that follows me is going to see it. Only a very small percentage. Only a very small percentage gets to see that. But if I can talk about it on another platform that also hopefully has some new eyeballs or ears, you know, that's going to do well. So I think it's like, you know, just sort of like getting over that hurdle and asking for help.
Gotcha. See, I don't know if you heard any of that, but hopefully you heard the part where Chris put us in the same sentence as Tom King. You know,
Stupid.
No, Chris, that was a fantastic response and some solid practical advice. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to let all of our listeners know, once again, I'm gonna plug again, man. Chris has got his first comic cover ever coming out through Dynamite Entertainment. For Vampirella Year 1, Issue 6. That campaign is live on Indiegogo for another couple of days, and you would be doing yourself a disservice not backing that project and helping such a solid champion of comic culture.
Yeah, we're not just waxing his car here, guys. This isn't just like, oh, do my friend a favor. Honestly, this is good quality stuff. You're going to be doing yourself a favor. You're going to be and in the process helping out one of the homies, man.
Yeah, true.
He's freaking one of the homies.
And it's kind of history too. I mean, a comic YouTuber with his own, you know, hand-drawn comic cover is like I said, hashtag goals.
And knocking out all the tropes within comic books
it's pretty dope.
Pretty cool. It is. I mean, what are you waiting for, guys? Honestly, like, be a part of the street team, represent.
Yeah.
I mean, come on now.
Tom King, holla. All right. Chris, we're going to let you go, man. But thank you once again. You're always welcome on the Short Box, right? Until next time.